Hey everybody, I'm about to set up a Dillon 550B. Set it up a few times now, but this is going to be its new permanent home. Set a few up. I'll also be setting up the 650B as well. I'll do that probably right after, or do it as another video. See if I can give you guys as much detail as possible while I'm doing it. As you can see here, I'm actually going to be using the Dillon stand plates. You don't need to use that, and I will quickly go over how to fit it without it. It's fairly standard. It has the actual bracket here that's flat fitting for the actual bench, and you can bolt it straight through. It's fairly quick. Sorry about the crappy camera skills. I've just got a little handy cam here, and I thought I'd do up a video for you guys. So I'll go over the bits and pieces that are required, and then we'll go ahead and set it up. Okay, just go over a few things that need to be set up. I will say that this one's actually been set up before, so not everything's in pieces as it comes out of the box. Some things are already kind of set up as they've come off from it. That includes the tool head being set up with a few dies already in it. Always be careful when you're moving these around not to lose the powder dropper. You got the main things. This isn't a standard setup because you've got like the projectile holder and things like that, which don't actually come standard depending on the package that you buy, and you can't really fit them without the standoffs. I'll start putting this together, and we'll go over a few more things. Okay, as I said before, you can fit them on these, which basically just sits up like this and actually has them sitting off the bench. And this will actually helps give you a bit more leverage, and if you can't actually fit it right on the corner, it'll give you that extra depth for the actual bar that drops down. I'll just quickly show you, if you're not using these, you can actually just mount this directly to the bench as it's actually set up for it as well. These are actually really good to use, but they're not necessary. This was originally set up without it. I've set it up both ways, and I just prefer the standoffs. It gives it a bit more height, and it's a bit easier to work with. So to start with, if you're using these, you basically just have to set them up through here using your through bolts. So they don't actually come with the bolts, but you can just get them from pretty much any hardware store. They might come with them. To be honest, I can't remember. It was that long ago. So you basically just have to undo. Can be a bit hard if you don't have an extra set of hands, but that's when the, like I said, dropping stuff. Now, I don't personally nip these up at this point. I like to get it all together and then center it up a bit more and then tighten everything up. You might want to nip them up and then put it all together and then loosen it up a bit and then nip them up from there once you've actually got everything centered and squared. So if you nip them up too early and they're on a bit of an angle, then you might have a side that's actually standing off and not sitting flush on the bench. In. Okay, once you've actually got that in there, then you actually want to work out exactly where you're going to be fitting it, because you're going to have to actually drill some holes through the bench, or you're going to have to put some fairly strong screws through it. In my experience, you're better off bolting it, because screws have a tendency to come loose and they just tear up the wood. So you're better off, depending on what you're fitting it on, you're better off actually drilling a hole through and then putting a bolt through it with a decent sized washer on the other side, just to give it that added strength. It also depends on the material that you're going into. If it's a chipboard or something soft, it's not going to last very long. Just really depends on where you're mounting it, really. So once I've actually worked out exactly where I want to mount it, one of the big things you want to look at is this bar. Because of how it operates, in some cases you'll actually fit the bar and then realize you want it to sit too far forward, and then the bar will actually hit the bench. So that's something you need to be mindful of. Okay, now I've actually put the drop arm on. What I was talking about before is when you're actually working out your spacing, make sure you put your drop arm on, because if you actually set your back up, you can see there's a gap you can fit your hand under. If you actually move it further back an inch and you go to drop it, it'll actually hit and you're not getting a full throw, so you're not actually going to get a full powder drop and you're not going to actually crimp your die properly. So when you're actually doing it, you need to make sure that it's far enough forward that there's at least, probably, I'd say 5 mil, what's that, 1/8 of an inch in metric, or imperial I should say. I like to leave a decent gap just for that extra little bit of bounce, so that it doesn't actually kick. If you want more, it's really up to you. It's just about making sure that there's enough gap there to clear, because you don't want to be hitting the bench. Not only will it damage your bench, but it'll stuff up what you're actually throwing, and you'll get inconsistent powder throws and all kinds of fun stuff. So it's all about making sure your tolerances are there, so that when you're actually dropping it down, you're not hitting your bench. It's also about, if you're actually mounting it directly on your bench, then you also have to worry about where things are hitting if you have it sitting forward, because it actually drops very low and it can still hit the bench. So just be careful of that as well. For the sake of actually just showing you guys how to mount it, I'm just going to actually screw fix this, and then I'm going to come back and bolt it through later, just because it takes a bit of time to do it through properly, because I'll have to be going through the bench and things like that. So let's go ahead and we'll look at that. I don't know about you guys, but I like to make sure things are square to the bench and things like that. Just makes it look a little bit more cosmetically nice. So I'm going to grab my tape and square all this up, and then I'll pop back. Okay, I've got everything lined up of where I want the actual holes. One of the other things now is what I've done is, since I've actually got this on the bench and level, I've nipped these up so that way there's no movement in these once I've actually screwed them down, because you don't want any twisting or anything like that. I'm only going to put little screws in at the moment, because as I said, I'm going to be bolting it down, but the bolts that I grabbed is just a bit too big, and I have to be pulling these out. Now, one of the things I do once I've actually lined it all up and make sure it's still on the line is I crisscross as I'm bolting it, just to make sure that it doesn't move either way. I also use an impact driver just because they're a lot quicker and they get a much stronger bite. I also use these to nip up my bolts and stuff on the non-moving parts. Anything that's moving, you don't want to use these, because it can damage it and snap screws and bolts and all kinds of stuff. But this is just to actually get it on the bench to show you guys how to quickly set it up. So once this is actually in place, you've actually mounted it, check your gaps. I like to have, as I said, I like to have a decent gap. That way, if there's any actual movement as you're flexing or anything like that, you're not going to hit your bench, and then there's no differences in your powder throw and other things like that. That's your tool head, powder dies in there, your neck die, which just sits in there. Got bits and pieces scattered all over the place at the moment as I try to pack it up. These are your locking pins for your tool head. They just slide in there. And of course, these are the actual pins for your brass that hold it in. Again, this is already set up. when you actually set this up, it's a bit dirty at the moment. When you're actually setting that up, you actually want to tighten that up, but not to the point where it's actually tight. You want to actually get it to a point where this stops and clicks in, but you don't want a hard click, because if it's a hard click, depending on what you're actually loading, it can actually kick powder out. It's one of the downsides to the Dillons is they've got a really good detent ball in there, but because it's spring loaded, in some cases when you actually cut through, it'll actually kick powder out. Not as bad with the 550s, because it's actually manual. You control how fast it turns and things like that. The 650, it's a bit more of an issue because it's all mechanical and automated. It'll actually roll around and it can kick powder out on you. So it's a bit more of an issue on there. So to do that, it's a grub screw down here. You loosen that off or tighten it up depending on what you're doing. So you tighten that down to whatever you want, tension that you're actually quite happy with, and then you just put that up and give that a couple turns. You don't want to over tighten it. You just a couple turns with an Allen key, and then give it a test to make sure that it's still exactly how you want it. From there, you want to look at whether you want to mount the top half first, or if you want to start mounting the brackets. So from there, you've got the bracket here for the projectile holder. And these actually all have specific spots that they're actually meant to go. Now these have lock nuts on them, meaning that once you've actually got it on there and a little bit tight, you don't actually have to hold the nut. If you just turn the screw with an Allen key or whatever the case may be, it'll actually just bite into the back and won't go anywhere, which is really handy if you don't have more than one set of tools or spanners or things like that. Also makes it handy for spots where it's hard to get your hand into. So I'm just going to do these up loosely for now. There are proper Allen keys for all of it. But to be honest, I'm not too sure where I've put them. I've got all my normal Allen keys, but probably should have been a little bit more prepared. If you're actually looking at these dies before, these are actually set up for a 3006, and it's actually missing a die because the die got damaged, and I actually got a replacement for it. One of the good things about Dillon is you don't actually, if you damage one die, you don't have to replace a whole lot. You can just replace the damaged die, which can save you a lot of money, especially in Australia, because Dillon is extremely expensive here. Great product, double the cost. Okay, that's all just done up hand tight now. Now with this as well, because it's sitting higher up, you no longer use the standard slide rail. You actually use this one, which then allows the bucket to hang from it. So this is actually just mounted on this side, and I might move the camera so that you can get a better look. Okay, now I've quickly fit it. Haven't got anywhere to sit the camera. So as you can see here, it actually replaces the standard, mounts to there, and then just comes up and sits in the normal spot across the top. And this is where it actually ejects your completed round and then down into the bucket. The buckets I haven't actually got here. It's probably sitting in another box somewhere. Now I'll go over setting up the powder system, and we can look at a bit more about that. Sorry about the zoomed in camera. Unfortunately, it's a cheap little camera and it doesn't really zoom out. I'll try and do a little bit with my phone as well. It actually has a much better video than this mini camcorder. We'll see how we go. The things I haven't actually shown you because it was already together. You'll actually have this bar here sitting out as part of the assembly, so you actually have to mount all this. This is all part of your primer setup. this little bar here actually sits in here, slides into this rail here, and then you actually have to pull your primer tray out, which is a bit hard to do one-handed. And then this rail actually locks in just behind it there, which actually then puts it in line with this, your slide bar, and it'll actually then action your primer. So that actually pulls it out, grabs a new primer, and then brings it back. While I'm on this side, I'll show you, this is just the spent primer catcher. That just slides in under here. And once that's in, I'll just give it a nice push to make sure it's down. And as you can see, that comes up. And when you actually push forward, it'll actually just drop it out, your spent primer out of here. And then, you know, once that gets full or half full or however often, or once you finished, you just empty it into the rubbish or wherever you want. It depends on your local laws. Just make sure you follow any local laws for disposal. Hey guys, just quickly go over putting the powder system on. I'm just re-recording this bit because I've cut half the press out when I was originally doing it and couldn't see what I was doing. So we'll just quickly go over it. When you pull this out of the box, it'll actually have two powder systems. It'll have a pistol powder system and then a magnum or rifle powder system. You just need to work out what you're loading and how many grains you're going to use, and you can decide which one you actually want to use. But predominantly for like small pistols, 9mm, all that kind of stuff, you're just going to be using this. But if you go up to the magnum rounds like 357 and all that kind of stuff, you're going to be using the magnum. Just really do your research for that kind of stuff. It just makes life a bit easier. On to putting it on. When you actually look at it, you'll see that it has a clamp bracket on the front that just slides onto the powder die. Basically just drop it on there. Only sit down as far as it needs to go, so don't worry too much about the alignment, and then just push that forward and it should clamp tight. At this point, just do it up finger tight, because you want a little bit of movement in there. You want that to actually move side to side. Then you're going to put in this powder arm. That actually just slides straight in there, so basically just through both levers and then down like that. That's actually going to sit down into the tool bracket arm. Line that into the hole, and then just drop it straight down, it'll pop in. What you want to do is try and make sure that this is as straight down as possible, so that when you're going up and down, it's not actually on an angle or anything like that. And once you've actually got that centered, you can tighten it up. And once you've tightened that up, just make sure that it hasn't moved and it's still got good operation. And once that's done, you're pretty much completely set up. The only thing to go to from there would actually be setting up your dies. Setting up your dies can be a bit of fun because it's a bit of playing around and a lot of measuring. And from there you can have a lot of fun with it. That's where a lot of the science comes in, and yeah, just have fun with it and be safe. If you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free, and I'll help you out when I can. Thank you.